unable to actualize their talent, even for that matter, even men, because jagah dur hai.
Swvl shut down. There were 1,200 odd individual messages that I'd received. They were either from women or they were from fathers of young girls. And the narrative was the same, ab main kya karungi?
In Karachi, we're almost about to hit 3 crore ka mark. We don't have, vehicles. We don't have affordable mobility, which is a basic human right.
As a woman, when I think of mobility, it means so much more to me because it also means my freedom, my sense of empowerment, my ability to not be relying on somebody else to take care of my basic thing. जो जहाँ से हमें पैसा मिलता था अपना हम लगा देते थे. I'd be asking them for money, they'd be saying no, and
I just... आप जाग रहे हो, पैसे दे दो. You said 458 rejection emails.
It's been an absolute battle because there is a global recession. There is this, bad se bura badnaam, which is mobility. Anyone who is a mentor to me or a friend to me has told me run. 458 rejections, most of them would be like, why don't you do anything else? And I'll write you a check right now.
Overall, bhi agar main dekhti hu, Maha, women, when they get promoted or they get a bigger role, people start assuming that it's not really on merit. It's because she's playing a woman card.
Absolutely. एक time period था जब मैं किसी भी job के लिए apply करती थी तो they'd say you should become a creative writer. नहीं, लड़की है ना, अंग्रेजी अच्छी होगी. I took out every lead that they couldn't close. I took the next 3 days off. I flew across the country. I closed every single one of them. I came, I threw it at the table and I said, don't ever tell me what I or a woman can and cannot do.
For Maha Shahzad, Buscaro is a way of life. Enough is enough. Hello and welcome to another Candid Conversation with me, Sidra Iqbal. These conversations are about being brutally honest, about actually bearing your heart कि आप जो success and glamour and glitz देखते हैं, उसके पीछे की कहानी क्या होती है. And I have just the right guest for you. आज हम बात करेंगे एक ऐसी शख्सियत से who's not only a very dear friend, but it would be right to say that she's the it girl. She is one of the leading figures when it comes to women in tech in Pakistan, Food Panda, Careem, Swvl, and now the founder of Buscaro. She has a diverse experience and of course I wanted to unpack with her कि ये जो हम बात करते हैं कि अगर वाकई आपने तरक्की करनी है, a lot of Gen Z, a lot of millennials want to now get into the tech space and that's the only way you can scale up, solve a number of societal problems. ये कहने में जितना आसान है, ये करने में कितना मुश्किल है. Let's find out. Today my guest is Maha Shahzad. Assalamu alaikum, Maha.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much for having me here, Sidra, and I'm so excited to just see you doing this podcast.
और तुम हमेशा से कैमरा शाय हो तो मुझे तुम्हें इस दफ़ा I was so pleasantly surprised कि it took वही वाली बात थी, वो जैसे नहीं कहते आप कन्विंस हो गई हैं मैं और बोलूँ तो मुझे आपको ज़्यादा मेहनत नहीं करनी पड़ी कन्विंस करने के लिए.
No, as long as it's a conversation,
that wasn't the case. That was not the case. जब मैं तुम्हें पहली दफ़ा टीवी पे बुलाया था, you're like, are you sure? Should I? And then अच्छा interview कर लिया उसके बाद मैंने कहा put it on LinkedIn. Are you sure? I'm like, dude, why are you shying away from the limelight? Have things changed or is it the same?
I've made some progress, and I think I have you to thank for that. I've accepted that it's a part of my job. But podcasts are a whole different story because I get to just sit here and have conversations with people, which is always wonderful. And it's, feels less limelighty.
Did I tell you that I am in love with not just the concept, but the name that you chose for your startup, Buscaro? I mean, I wish more women would say Buscaro. I say it many times a day. Lekin, please tell me the story behind it.
So वो story actually वो हम रोज बैठे हुए थे and fuel prices रोज बदलती थी और हम रोज जो है we used to sit and plan कि अब business किस तरह build होगा. And somebody literally one day just said, bus karo yaar. And another colleague turned around and said, that's what we should be called. Because we're literally a bus in a car, but also because bus karo and also because, that was our way of saying bus karo to everything that I think we were dealing with and were trying to solve for at the time. Aur bas aa gaya naam.
Achha, for those of you who do not understand Urdu, bus karo is almost like saying enough is enough.
Enough is enough.
And what a thought, man. यानी कई चीज़ों के बारे में वाकई, why I started thinking about this conversation, Maha, because I found this amazing, होता है ना कि some people are just God sent. So I found this amazing talent who I would have loved to have as an associate. और ये लड़की अभी फ्रेश ग्रेजुएट है, शी इज़ कम्प्लीटेड हर इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस and I met her by chance. मुझे वो मिली. She wanted to intern with me on the TV show, and I thought, this girl's got talent. I really want to have her for my podcast and for managing me because I'm all over the place. And as much as she wants to join me, the first thing she said was, my mother says कि मैं she's hardly 23, 24 कि मैं घर वापस कैसे आऊँगी. And that's when I started thinking about you कि यार कितनी लड़कियाँ, कितनी ख़वातीन are unable to actualize their talent, even for that matter, even men, because जगह दूर है. आपका स्कूल कौन सा होगा, आपका कॉलेज कौन सा होगा, आप कहाँ पे काम करेंगी, everything is decided by that.
So Sidra, you actually know this because when this was happening, you were actually one of my first phone calls, but Swvl shut down about a year and a half ago. I was heading that business in Pakistan at the time. And जिस दिन वो बंद हुआ है, I on just my personal LinkedIn, which is a thank you and a why did you do this to me to you. There were 1,200 odd individual messages that I'd received. They were either from women or they were from fathers of young girls. And the narrative was the same. अब मैं क्या करूँगी या अब मेरी बेटी स्कूल कैसे जाएगी? Because they finally had a way. There are women who told me that, we'd now gotten jobs because we'd found affordable, safe commute, which not only is a problem in Pakistan, but obviously globally for us, the issues are slightly different. But that remains the number one challenge that, I see women dealing with. I personally dropped out of college. Back in the day, I don't know if even you know this, because it used to take me about 7 hours to go to school.
7 घंटे?
7 घंटे.
कहाँ तुमने school?
Southern California.
Oh, okay.
I would change 3 buses. And मैं जाती थी और जब तक मैं college पहुँचती थी and I'd come back, that was about 7 hours. I was an international student. I was also paying for college on my own, so I couldn't stop working. And I eventually said, okay, when I can afford a car, I'll go back to school. And I quit and I gave that up. I then got my first job in Pakistan and, was paid competitively, but I'd spent close to 90% of my income commuting, right? And I had the luxury of knowing कि जी promotion होगा, पैसे ज़्यादा बनेंगे, and you get 20 of these promotions and eventually this will be no money to me.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, a sacrifice that every single woman has to make when she's starting her career. And I think for a lot of women, they just get stuck at that stage, right? Where it's like, why should I go to work then?
और हम जब बात कर रहे होते हैं ना, sometimes I feel so, शर्म भी आती है इस बात पे. You feel so privileged, so entitled कि मैरी एंटोनेट की तरह कि अच्छा ये they don't have bread, give them cakes. क्यों नहीं है आपके पास गाड़ी और ड्राइवर? लेकिन हमारे मुल्क में ही क्या, पूरी दुनिया में कई लोगों की हकीकत यही है कि अगर आपके घर में एक व्हीकल भी है और घर में 5 लोग हैं और उसमें से कुछ स्कूल जा रहे हैं, कुछ कॉलेज जा रहे हैं, कोई अपने काम पे जा रहा है, you need, and this is something that the government needs to plan. तुम्हें क्या लगता है? मैंने पढ़ा था कि आपकी आबादी जब 1 करोड़ के करीब पहुंचने लगे, उस वक्त आपका एक फ़ाल पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट mass transit system needs to be in place. In Karachi, we're almost about to hit 3 करोड़ का mark. We don't have, vehicles. We don't have affordable mobility, which is a basic human right.
So if we talk about Karachi's public transport system, if we were all to start using it, it could cater to about 20-odd%. But not just that, right? There's a major accessibility issue. So even to use that, people tend to take a bike or take a rickshaw to get to that first point and that last point, and you're still solving for your first and last mile, right? And so that remains a huge issue. Public transportation, Pakistan में उस तरह से नहीं आएगा because we can't afford it. Simple. And so we're constantly in this sort of cycle, right? And what we've seen is some tech companies and we've seen the private sector come in and try to make some strides there. But this is a problem that the government should be solving for, and that's the way it's done in most countries, in fact, all. And just here that numerically is almost an impossible equation, just in terms of the capital that would need to be spent to bring that in. And so I think it's very important that, the private sector steps in here and we do the kind of things that, Buscaro is doing today to create that sort of solution for people.
But let's go back in time. Na? अगर हम पाकिस्तान की बात करें, I think it was Nawaz Sharif's era back in the 90s where he first brought the yellow cab. और उस वक्त भी कहा जाता है, my parents tell us, because we were too young to really understand what's going on, कि it was presented as a dignified employment opportunity. कि पढ़े लिखे नौजवान सिर्फ नॉर्मल काली पीली टैक्सी नहीं चला रहे, बट एन अपग्रेडेड नाइस व्हीकल. इट वाज अस्यूम्ड कि वो एक अच्छे तरीके से उसको चलाएंगे, उनकी एथिक्स बेहतर होगी, कस्टमर सेटिस्फैक्शन ज़्यादा होगी. If I look at that model, when the government did try to step in, what went wrong? वहाँ पे क्या गलती की थी?
I mean, one, I'd argue even there, the quantum wasn't there. But two, also, what we've seen is when things are managed by the public sector, just the quality of those vehicles, for instance, is not maintained. Now, if you compare that to Careem or Uber, there were cars brought in, people drove them, and that was managed, right? Because there was some sort of an actual business there where people's incomes were tied to the quality of those vehicles, and we've seen that model work. With the yellow taxi sort of thing, I really do argue that a quantum was not there. You didn't have enough of them to solve for all of us, but B, there was just nothing was maintained, right? And given the kind of population that we have, no effort was sort of made after that. Now you see these random buses coming in, and that's wonderful. आधी हमारी खराब पड़ी होती हैं, we don't know how to fix them on ground, and again, like, you know,
मनपसंद किराए होते हैं, रूट की कोई बात नहीं है, बस स्टॉप्स हमारे पास है नहीं, बस कहाँ रुके, कहाँ से लोग राइड हेल करें, उसके आने का कोई फ़र्क नहीं पता. यानी आप और मैं वी ट्रैवल अब्रॉड, तो हमें पता होता है, वो बता रहा होता है कि ये बस 4 मिनट के बाद आनी है, चलो आज डिले हो गई. यानी यू फील कि समबडी इज़ टेकिंग केयर ऑफ़ यू. वो पूरा इकोसिस्टम नहीं है. बट लेट मी टेक यू बैक टू योर टाइम एट करीम. करीम बहुत ही नॉवल आइडिया था पाकिस्तान के लिए कि भाई एक अनजान शख्स आएगा जिसको आपने ऐप के थ्रू बुलाया है और आपको सेफली आपकी मंजिल तक पहुंचाएगा. व्हाट वर द की लर्निंग्स देयर फॉर यू, महा?
I think even when I first heard the idea, I was not sure if that could be pulled off, right? Because to convince people in our country who already generally feel unsafe that it's okay to travel with a stranger, there was always a lot of work that needed to be done there, right? And especially because you'd be catering to women. That being said, you know, one, I think Careem made a lot of effort on the safety end to ensure that comfort is built. You know, started very small and then rapidly eventually grew. Used a student base to sort of get that off the ground until it was a household name. But what that was able to do was, even for me, not just as somebody who worked there, but just as a customer, it made my life very simple. Careem was the first job that I had jahan pe I didn't worry about how I'll get to work and get back, right? Like so many other women, I would just book that ride. And there was a time that Careem and Uber were doing close to 1 million bookings a day. Careem's business was primarily being used by women. That was creating, obviously, opportunities for more women to go to school, more women to go to college and work, and so on and so forth, right? And I feel that we keep talking about solving from this point A to point B, but as a woman, when I think of mobility, it means so much more to me because it also means my freedom, my sense of empowerment, my ability to not be relying on somebody else to take care of my basic things, right?
And that sounds so empowering and enabling. And Maha, मुझे ये बताओ कि from the outside, I'm sure for a number of reasons, you're like an inspiration, a role model to many women. They want to be in a tech startup ecosystem. They want to be a founder like you. They want to be able to win 1.5 million seed money, which, mashallah, you did. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
But tell us what they don't know. Yani, how hard was it?
I want to start with this 1.5 million that you've mentioned, right? And you know this personally, I wasn't getting 1.5 million.
You said 458 rejection emails. I remember the number.
And then there's more. There's more after that, right? When I wanted to start Buscaro, that was the summer of last year. Nobody in their right minds was willing to give me money, right? Because एक investor FOMO नाम की भी बहुत चीज़ होती है. And I was getting into a sector which just wasn't cool anymore.
And you had disasters. Like, people thought कि जब Swvl pull out कर सकता है, करीम बेच बाज के चला गया, तो इसका मतलब है mobility solutions in Pakistan, even though high risk है, high gains है, लेकिन चलने वाला मॉडल नहीं है.
नहीं चल सकता. And globally also, right? We were seeing that most of these companies weren't doing well, and so it wasn't even a question. And I used to fundraise round the clock. Depending on different time zones, wherever somebody is awake, I'd be asking them for money. They'd be saying no, and I just
आप जाग रहे हो, पैसे दे दो.
Yeah, that was my life, right? And not just that, and I initially actually funded it myself for the first 6 months.
I remember you were bootstrapping.
I bootstrapped. It was me and actually a couple of colleagues जो जहाँ से हमें पैसा मिलता था अपना हम लगा देते थे. And November is the first time that somebody wrote us any check. which was months in. At this point, hum ek pura pilot kar chuke the. We'd, proven the business model and then sort of gotten that capital, right? And even from that point on, it's been an absolute battle because there is a global recession. There is this, bad se bura badnaam, which is mobility. Which has just become very unpopular globally. And then there's the additional challenges of a market like Pakistan. And so, it all sounds great and now everybody's publishing articles on it, but it's not like I woke up one day and I went and asked for money and I raised this 1 week round and it was oversubscribed. The honest truth is that I raised this money over the course of the last year and change. And it's been little checks here and there that we've basically put together to eventually come up with this amount.
Were there moments of self-doubt?
Every second of every day, I have doubted myself because the truth is there are companies who spent over $100 million and they've failed, right? Anyone who is a mentor to me or a friend to me has told me run, right? Because they care about me. And anyone who isn't has been laughing at me all along, right? Thinking I've lost my mind. And so, yes, there's a lot of doubt. There was a lot of doubt on a daily basis. And I was in this unique situation where, I have a certain profile. And so when I'd speak to these 458 rejections, most of them would be like, why don't you do anything else? And I'll write you a check right now. Which is a pretty tempting offer for an entrepreneur.
What did they mean by that? देखो, I want to unearth the lesson there. आमतौर पे लोग कहते हैं कि यार लोग आपके देखो हमारे यहाँ लोग fearful हैं. लोग समझते हैं कि मैं किसी से जाके अपना idea discuss करूँगा तो मेरा idea पोच करके ले जाएंगे. In your case, they liked you more than your idea. They like idea में ज़्यादा दम नहीं नजर आ रहा.
लेकिन the idea, we love you. आप और कुछ कर लें.
आप कुछ और कर लें.
हमें ये 6 चीज़ों में आप invest हम कर देंगे, right? And so literally मुझे हर कोई कहता है आप मिठाई की दुकान खोल लें. आप ये 6 sectors में चली जाएं. Because every year we hear about things.
So they believed in you, but not your idea.
Yes.
That's a very unique position.
And I think it was meant as a compliment, but I think that was like the biggest insult in a way, because I'd rather that people said they didn't believe in me, but they at least believed in what I was doing. But yes, so that's kind of been the situation. But I'm speaking about this because if anybody is listening to this, I want people to know that fundraising is not a joke, right? And, we read these articles that come out and you hear founders have raised millions of dollars and sounds very glamorous, but it's really not a glamorous process.
Correct me if I'm wrong. There are so many accelerators, incubators जो इस बात पे बड़े खुश हैं, and they proudly report कि so many of ideas जो वहाँ पे जिनकी birth होती है या incubate होते हैं वो they win the seed money. And what happens after that? I mean, I know that in the Silicon Valley, many ideas will crash and burn. लेकिन हमने क्या उसको excuse ही नहीं बना लिया? There's so many ideas that get the seed money, but they're not taking off. What's going on?
So I'm going to be almost controversial here and just say it. 2021 is essentially when most of these startups that we think of when we think of money came out, right? And you had this 1 year where Pakistan was just being thrown money at. And, rounds were huge. And that was happening, right? If you look at things historically before that and you think about local startups, aapko ek baikiya yaad aayega, ek cheete yaad aa jayega, ek maybe dawai yaad aa jayega, but pre-2021, those are the names that I can think of. And after that, again, you've probably had 2 or 3 new startups come out since last summer, I'd say. And in the middle, you had this whole time period where if you're a Pakistani founder, and if you worked at even maybe one of these 4 other companies that are famous here, you can raise a round overnight, right? And that's when we've seen this happen. Now, I want to talk about timing, right? Because globally, if you look at any successful tech company, be that Amazon, be that Uber, you've seen that happen over 7, 8, 10 years, right? And the failures that we talk about all happened very, very quickly, right? Or were
Crash
companies,
and burn.
Right. And the ones that we expected even to do well, I don't think they were given that sort of time to do it, right? I'm going to talk about the company that's closest to my heart, and I'm going to talk about Swvl. I keep hearing how we failed. 2019 is when Swvl started. 2021
early 2020s when COVID hit.
Early 2020 is when COVID hit, right? So they had a few operational months. We had to sit tight for the next year and a half because obviously we weren't allowed to operate.
Smart lockdowns थे, बहुत एक uncertain situation थी ना.
And then we had 1 year. And in that 1 year, if we talk about Pakistan, the business skyrocketed. We beat every other market out there. We beat Egypt, which was Swvl's first and original market, right? And this happened just from bookings, from GMV, from any sort of KPI that you look at. And unfortunately, we sitting here couldn't control what would happen in Russia and Ukraine.
But tell me something. Help me unpack that. A lot of people argue कि स्विवल के फेल होने की एक बड़ी वजह ये थी कि आपकी बुकिंग्स आ रही थी, सब कुछ आता, बट योर राइड्स वर ओवर सब्सिडाइज, सो एवरीबडी वाज मेकिंग मनी, योर ट्रांसपोर्टर्स वर हैप्पी, यानी जितने खान चाचा मामा सारे साथ मिले हुए थे, दे वर गेटिंग मनी थ्रू यू. एंड राइडर बहुत मुतमईन था क्योंकि कस्टमर को बहुत सस्ती राइड मिल रही थी, बट पीपल आर्ग्यू इट वाज नेवर सस्टेनेबल टू बिगिन विद.
To begin with, yes. But to begin with, if you look at any tech company, nobody started sustainably. If you look at where Swvl was when it exited, or when unfortunately it had to be shut down in Pakistan last year, those numbers look very different, right? Now, initially you had a Swvl and an airlift. You've given two companies too much money. And obviously they want to capture market share, right? Or agar aapka competitor jaake is overpaying for a vehicle, then you have to do it too, right? Which is also the argument that airlift would be making against us. And that was sort of a cycle, right?
तो ये प्राइस वॉर की वजह से हुआ.
Price wars initially meant that अगर दूसरा 20 रुपए में सीट दे रहा है and a customer's propensity to pay is 100 rupees, you still have to match that because nobody's going to give up the additional 80 rupee discount, right? अगर supplier को कोई और 2 लाख रुपए दे रहा है गाड़ी के जो 70,000 की होनी चाहिए, आप नहीं दे सकते.
So you were burning the candle at both ends. यानी आपको
absolutely,
है ना?
Absolutely.
पैसे भी कम लो और ट्रांसपोर्टर को उतने फुल दे रहे हैं.
बिल्कुल. But this was in the early days, right? If we talk post COVID, when we restarted, I can tell you that when I was hired at Swvl, the job I was hired to do and everybody who came in at that time was to fix for the economics and the sustainability. And Swvl was on track to be profitable by the end of 2023.
Why did they pull out then?
Because you had funding dry up almost overnight when you had the war last year. And so end of March last year, we were all in New York ringing the bell. A bunch of brown kids. It was
I saw that on your LinkedIn.
That was the 31st of March. And it was very early in May when we had to take that decision to shut the business down.
Where were you when you found out?
I was in Pakistan and I said, main band nahi karungi. And I called up Mustafa and I said, there is no way. I want 6 interns. I don't want a salary. I want 3 months and I want non-existent capital. I will get you a profitable business and we are going to grow sustainably from there. I'm not shutting it down.
In hindsight, ये stubbornness थी, जिद थी, गुस्सा था, क्या था? Why did you choose to say कि नहीं मैं बंद नहीं करूँगी?
Because Sidra, this is a human right, number one. And because of that, and yes, I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm not running an NGO or, was hired to run one. But if this is the most important problem that you're solving for, then there is a huge opportunity. And if there is a huge opportunity, then there's no way you can't also make money off that, right? I can't say, Kiji, I'm going to solve for getting Sidra to work and back, and she won't pay for it. That makes no sense, right? That's, to me, like, it defies logic. Like, it's just very simple. People need this. They will pay for it. And when they do, I also get to create a whole lot of impact. Because if I can get women in a bus today, those are going to be women who are buying cars tomorrow. Those are going to be women who are buying aircraft the day after tomorrow.
Those will be women who are paying their bills and who are making their dreams come true. It could be anything. वो डॉक्टर हो सकती हैं, वो टीचर हो सकती हैं, वो इंजीनियर हो सकती हैं, and people need that. जब हम बात करते हैं ना कि अब पाकिस्तान की आबादी 50% ख़वातीन पर मुश्तमिल है और आपका मुल्क, आपकी कौम तरक्की नहीं कर सकते जब तक आप उनको मोबिलाइज नहीं करेंगे, जब तक वो वर्क स्ट्रीम में नहीं आएंगे. These are the steps you need to walk. Why wasn't the government interested in keeping it up and running? बात हुई थी?
No. And the government had just changed that at that time also. So the previous government, I was in talks with to do a lot of public-private partnerships, right? Because one of the things that I also think that when I say we, anyone in mobility can really help with is we can optimize the network. I know better than the government कि अगर उन्होंने बस चलानी है तो वो किस वक्त कहाँ चलनी चाहिए, right?
Route आपको पता है.
route क्या होना चाहिए to maximize utilizations and their profitability and solve for the most number of people, right? And so those are kind of partnerships that we were in talks with. Electric vehicles again is something that I'm very passionate about.
I think Careem के पास एक option था ना, जिस तरह हम UAE में देखते हैं, they tied up, there were massive strikes, people were asking कि भाई what happens to the regular cabs, so they did like a sign up with Yalla Cab, so all the cabs are also available through the Careem app. And the government was not interested in a solution like that?
I think that, for any of these solutions to happen, I think it's going to take time. But I think ultimately they will have to happen.
Okay.
I think especially with, buses, because with Cab Sidra, it's still a little bit easier because you need one customer at a time, right? Which in retrospect now sounds like a very easy job. With a bus, you need 60 at a time. And so it's a lot more complicated. And so you can get, that demand filled in from different places. It makes a whole lot more of a difference. And I think ultimately that is something that's going to happen. I think that ab tak nahi hua hai. I know that, I was leading some conversations at Swvl and then unfortunately, things change. But in terms of what I want to hopefully do is one of the things that we'd really like to solve for, of course, is the basic business that we do, which is get people around safely, cheaply, right? And we do that ourselves. The second thing we want to do is really work on the sustainability aspect of things, because I think that both you and I should stop using our car and get behind a bus just to save those carbon emissions, right? And so that's an initiative that I'm very passionate about as well.
एक added benefit in चीज़ों का ये होता है, the sense of community comes in.
Absolutely.
I mean, you get to actually mix and match. Your cities should be safe. यानी अगर हम कहीं पे भी दुनिया में travel करते हैं, even for that matter, GCC countries, Muslim countries की हम बात करते हैं, women can get out at 12 in the night या रात के 2 बजे भी, and they know that they are safe. They can hail a cab. They can find some kind of transportation, and that's a basic human. But let me zoom out a little bit. मुझे ये बताओ कि मुझे एक चीज़ से बहुत मसला है वहाँ के women in tech. I like the fact that it's an enabler, it's an equalizer, it gives you more opportunities, but why is it often presented as कि अगर आप घर से बाहर नहीं निकलना चाहती तो आप घर बैठ के भी आपका करियर बन सकता है. Why is that the entry point?
It shouldn't be.
है ना?
It absolutely shouldn't be. But look, I think that there's still very, very blatant discrimination in this country and in most parts of the world. And I think a lot of that is as a result of that, right? I think that women should have the same career path as men, which is you get a job,
India Nui says that's not possible. उसने कहा कि जी, the biological clock and the career clock are in conflict और ऐसा कभी नहीं हो सकता. आपकी क्या ख्याल है इस बारे में?
I think that's, I'm trying to think of a polite word, but I think that's quite ridiculous, right?
Isn't it also true? Because she says कि देखो, and I did actually some study around that. तुम देखो अगर हमारे यहाँ fresh graduates की बात की जाए, business graduates की, लड़का और लड़की एक ही टाइम पे यूनिवर्सिटी से निकलेंगे और organization join करेंगे. The girl, while she is meritorious, may be climbing the corporate ladder faster, but the way the society looks at her is कि she's a failure if she's not married.
Absolutely.
तो वो अच्छा अब शादी करके वो करियर अगर कंटिन्यू करती है तो while her responsibilities at work are increasing, so are her responsibilities back at home.
Right.
बच्चे बड़े हो रहे हैं, फलाना ढमाका, what not. So I think there's some merit in what India Nui is saying, right?
I think that there are children that need to be raised, and I think there's money that needs to be made. Now, I don't see why as a family unit, a husband and wife, because he's also the father to this child combined, cannot manage this, right?
You know what I'm smiling about, because you had your Priyanka Chopra moment, how she says like the roti's gotta rotate and the potatoes gotta potate, and you're like the children that have to be raised and the money that has to be made. Did you do it on purpose?
I did not. I was just trying to say this in a very polite way. But I think that there's like a family unit, right? And especially in Pakistan, I feel like this is the easiest country in the world for women to be managing both, because you have the nani, nana, cha-cha. We have like these huge families. And there has to be somebody available to babysit at that time that this woman needs to go and have an important meeting. I just don't see why that cannot be managed. And
I usually get like, eyes rolled up when I say that, because people turn around, and I'm sure you get it too, कि भाई आप लोगों के लिए कहना आसान है, आपके बच्चे नहीं हैं, आपका मियाँ नहीं है, तो आपको क्या पता?
But Sidra, I honestly also am just learning this, right? I was at a conference, I think it was just over a year ago. And until then, I was this like single workaholic, and I would never think even, because I was like, no, if I want to have a career, like it's just not an option for me, because no man will also accept that. And there's this woman I'm extremely inspired by, Keliye, and I met her for a meeting, and I found out she's pregnant. And she's like, this is my last trip because I'm about to give birth. And I'm like, have you shut down? Are you shut? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, so you're going to continue to have this career and have a child and you're married and like women can have that? And she's like, yes. And I fast forward a year later, I sent a message the other day. I'm like, thanks to you, I'm getting married, right? Because of you, I have my LinkedIn, and because of her, I'm going to be getting married, because that was my moment to realize, no, wait, women can do
have
multiple things. Like, why not, right? But I feel like there is a role that men have to play to support that in happening, which I think that now you're starting to see. I see these unique cases where it's happening, and I think that just needs to happen on a more
Is it really
mass
that
scale.
unique? अच्छा मुझे एक बात बताओ कि हमारे यहाँ, and I do a lot of shows around that, especially working women, ambitious women, amazingly ambitious women like yourself. So top 3 qualities a man should have, because I think I don't remember who said it, but very recently somebody made this remark and it made so much sense कि यार हम we empower women. And we want them to have the world, we want them to progress in their careers, but we don't teach men how to be around such women. यानी मर्द को यही बताया जाता है कि उसने औरत का ख्याल रखना है, घर का हेड होना है, सारी financial needs पूरी करनी है. So here he has a counterpart who's doing a little bit of what he is used to of doing. तो उसको handle करना ही नहीं आता. तो अगर मैं तुमसे पूछूं कि top 3 qualities that a man should have if he wants to survive and thrive with an ambitious woman, what would it be?
Can I say like confidence, and then everything else? Because I think the biggest problem that I see are men are generally very insecure around strong women, and they're generally extremely intimidated, right? And you see that in all sorts of situations. And I think a man has to be comfortable in his own skin and think he's worth something. And when that's there, when he, goes home to a woman who's also accomplished, he's proud of her, as opposed to feeling threatened and feeling like, she's taken over what's his right, or what's he supposed to be like a man sort of space, right?
How easy or difficult was that? How many, जैसे अंग्रेजी में वो कहते हैं ना कि how many frogs did you have to kiss before you got your prince? कितने मर्दों को ये बात समझ आती है वहाँ?
Yeah, one too many. One too many. But I think a part of that was also on me, right? Because I used to believe that I don't have that right. And so maybe I was also not manifesting that, because for me, I thought, because I want to be successful, like मुझे तो हक ही नहीं है कि मेरी फिर शादी हो.
Either in or situation
मेरा
में
कोई
फंस जाते हैं,
right? Yeah, I was stuck in this either or. I think I only accepted it like last year that, wait, no, why can't I have it all? Like, I'm perfectly competent. I can do multiple things. I already do. I can do, one more thing. And also that having a partner shouldn't feel like a full-time job. If anything, it should feel like support. But yeah, I would say, like, for me, what I've learned is a man has to be very comfortable in his own skin. If he's proud of himself, he can be proud of his woman and whatever she's accomplishing. And if not, and, if he's
What's your relationship with ambition? मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि ambition should come naturally to confident women. But a lot of times, and thanks to a lot of programming that goes around, कि जी आपका दिल टूटा है, उसके बाद you start working on becoming the best version of yourself. There are shows like Revenge Body. मैं gym इसलिए जाऊँगी क्योंकि अब मेरा दिल टूटा है, and he should realize what he's missing out वाली जो एक mindset होती है. लेकिन अगर मैं आपकी बात करूँ कि was ambition a reaction in any way to a setback or a heartbreak?
So I don't know if I'm ambitious. But I think my, zid to get things done and this whole thing of like, I will solve this problem one way or another, I think it comes from having just faced those obstacles, right? And I feel like I have constantly been told that I am, I have no value because I'm a woman, right? Like, that's something I've seen my whole life. and so on and so forth. And I think the reason that mobility has become this thing that I'm obsessed with is I think that's where I felt most shackles and the most dependency. Because if you need to get anywhere, you need to ask a man to, sort of help you and take that favor.
I like it when they say, you would not believe how much you can accomplish if you simply, quietly and authoritatively ask for it. As women, we are not taught to ask for things. यानी हमें ऐसा लगता है हम पहले ही सारी stories assume कर लेते हैं कि मना करने की ये वजह होगी, अभी तो हालात अच्छे नहीं है, फलाना नहीं है. And in a society where even if I forget about women in tech, overall भी अगर मैं देखती हूँ Maha, women when they get promoted or they get a bigger role, people start assuming that it's not really on merit. It's because she's playing a woman card.
Absolutely.
Did you face that in technology, in startups?
So there's multiple things that you face. First, I think I've gone through a time where I was told point blank, you can't have this job because you're a woman. So
really?
एक time period था जब मैं किसी भी job के लिए apply करती थी तो they'd say you should become a creative writer. And I was like, I can't write creatively to save my life. I'd be terrible. Why? नहीं, लड़की है ना, अंग्रेजी अच्छी होगी. These are conversations I was having at prestigious organizations. And I'm like, but that's not what I want to do. And I got my first job in tech agreeing to this creative writing role, which, by the way, I should have been fired from. I got in. I called in sick the next day. मुझे sales करनी थी. I took out every lead that they couldn't close. I took the next 3 days off. I flew across the country. I closed every single one of them. I came, I threw it at the table and I said, don't ever tell me what I or a woman can and cannot do. And I said, by the way, I've changed my business cards.
Well, see.
Yeah, but I mean, that's, then it's like, not as acceptable. But that's how I started my career. And then every organization, I think I've had multiple issues. I really had to go in and convince people that I'm capable of doing my job. मुझे कोई project मिलता था तो I could hear men laughing कि like ये तो हम मर्दों से नहीं हुआ, ये लड़की क्या करेगी, right?
गुस्सा आता था जब ये सब सुनते.
Yeah, and that gussa is also what's
But how would you, a lot of girls are watching you, a lot of women would want to know, how do you channel that gussa? A lot of times women end up crying, they end up quitting, they self-doubt. कुछ हमारी तरह ही होती हैं कि अच्छा नहीं, roll up my sleeves and see what I can do. But is anger a good place to operate from, number one? And number two, how do you channel it as a strength?
Is anger healthy? No, right? And is it today the way that I operate? No. But in leading up to where I am today, yes, there was a lot of anger because I think that there was just a lot of discrimination. And I used that to get that fuel to just beat everyone at what they do, right? Till people shut up. I'd hope that a woman doesn't have to be in that situation today because I'm also talking about a decade ago and I hope that we've progressed. And
I hope so. Fingers crossed.
And, no woman is operating with that anger anymore. But for me, that's sort of been the journey, right? There was this anger and you'd use that to stay up 18 hours, work so hard that, you were just so much better than everybody else and people had to eventually give you your credit. And that was sort of the cycle, right?
What are some of the key mistakes? अगर तुम्हारे experience को draw up करते हैं, you want no woman to be operating out of anger. लेकिन अगर सिर्फ women in tech की बात करूं, common mistakes you see women making.
I have let things that people say get under my skin. And I don't think that's something that's just tech related. I think every woman hears all kinds of things about why she's successful when she is. And prior to her being successful, कि वो तो हो ही नहीं सकती, हो गई तो फिर किसी और वजह से हुई होगी. And I think not just me, but I think a lot of women let that sort of get to them. But people's words don't define us, and they shouldn't. And I think that people should be very clear on what their worth is and ignore the rest of that noise, which is something that, to be very honest, Sidra, I think I wasn't able to do for a very, very long time. And I used to really let that get to me. I think that's the number one thing that I've learned, right? And the number two thing that I've known and I'd really want everyone else to know is, irrespective of what people think you can or cannot do, you need to be making that decision for yourself and just go out and do it, right? The worst thing that can happen is you fail, which is really learning, and you'll use that.
So for Maha Shahzad, Buscaro is a way of life. Enough is enough.
Absolutely, I think that's been my life, my life's mantra of the last my entire adult life, and continues to be. But I do feel the one thing that I feel very proud of is I do think there's some change today, right? Because I think that women in these even exceptional cases end up educating a lot of other men around them, right? And so every time you see one woman in an organization, if you look a year later, there's suddenly 10, 20 of them. Because those women start hiring other women, and then men around them start hiring women because they're like, oh,
We are
ये तो
creating
बड़ी
monsters.
efficient
हम
है.
पूरा एक club बना लेंगे monsters का. Women who don't take no for an answer. Women who are out to prove themselves. And I think the first step is when she is mobile. And Maha, तुम्हें लगता है कि not just philosophically, so many people, so many pressure groups in our society are scared of that. आपने अक्सर देखा होगा घर में रहने वाली खातून, अच्छी लड़की, and the one who steps out, not realizing कि यार ये जो माशरा है, क्योंकि आपने उसको सेफ ट्रांसपोर्टेशन नहीं दी, क्योंकि ईव टीजिंग होती है, क्योंकि लोग बुरे तरीके से उनका रवैया बुरा होता है, it's not the woman's fault. वो बुरी क्यों बनती है जब वो घर से कदम निकालती है, बजाय इसके कि आप इन बाकी चीज़ों को एड्रेस करें.
Absolutely. But I think that, you know, our country is in such a unique position right now where we're in such a bad recession that I think the one good thing that's come out of it is I think women are suddenly, quote unquote, allowed to work, right? Which I get very excited about. And so you're seeing that sort of movement happening just because you generally can't run a household on one income anymore, which I'm very happy about.
It's a blessing in disguise.
It's a blessing in disguise. I think it's a blessing in disguise for every woman out there because it's creating these sort of opportunities, right? And so I'm seeing that change happen, right? I'm seeing that you get this one woman in and then you see this multiplication of women. If you think about, you know, the tech sector, I'd say, I think 2 saal pehle bhi, I think I was the only female country head that we had. Today I can name a whole bunch of them. I mean, sure, they're still on my fingertips, but there's 10 times as many, right? I can name female founders today.
You may have been the
that.
first, but you're definitely not going to be the last.
And so I think, you know, that change is coming. But ultimately, I think that change has to be driven through many things, right? One, I see women who come from families that are supportive, but there's like this, you know, mobility barrier. And so companies like mine and many others are trying to solve for that. Two, there has to, of course, be more flexibility in terms of how they work, as long as they're getting their work done, which is in a way I think tech is great for, because we also don't ask men what time they came to work or didn't come. We ask if the task was done. We ask the woman if the task was done, and we don't care beyond that, right? And so I think that flexibility that's happening in careers in terms of how you want to work, not how much you work, that's a huge help. But 3, I think that we need to do everything we can to just educate men, because until we can do that, we can work on women's rights all we want. It's not, you know, going to translate into much.
I didn't think about it. लेकिन मुझे ऐसा लगता है the whole conversation went into not just being ambitious, but also setting standards and boundaries for yourself, which is also a way of interpreting Buscaro. Women struggle with setting boundaries. I think my last question to you would be, what would be your advice? It's usually unpopular because कहते हैं ना कि यार the givers have to have limits because takers seldom do. तो जो ख़वातीन सुन रही हैं who are struggling with that, कि भाई किसी ने कहा 4 बजे तुम्हारा कर्फ्यू टाइम है, 4 बजे वापस आ जाओ, not abiding by that same rule book themselves. How do they set boundaries? How do they say they take space for their individual growth? क्या मशवरा दोगे?
That's an excellent question, and one I probably don't have a very good answer for, because I think I am learning that myself. But I do think that it comes from having self-worth, right? Because you need to have some value placed on yourself, number one. Whereas I think that women in general are just built to give, which is great. But what is it that you need to take, right? And I think there has to just be very clear boundaries in terms of what, you know, are non-negotiables for women, which is never a conversation. And I think that needs to be one. But also of like the kind of support that they need, right? Because even if a woman is attempting to do this 4 p.m. thing, maybe she'll be able to do it 4 days a week. And the one day she can't, other people need to step up for her like she does the other 80% of the time.
And she shouldn't need to walk on eggshells for that. And it's a two-way street. जिस तरह हम मर्दों के लिए या कोई भी शख्स अगर बाहर काम करने के लिए जाता है, you make exceptions. You don't question their character. You don't question their intent कि जानबूझ के कर रही है, मुझे अपीस कर रही है, मैंने रूल बना लिया. भाई आप कौन?
Who are you?
वो जो नहीं होता कि ये रूल बनाने की पोजीशन आपको मिली कैसे है. But, you know, having said that, not in a challenging, confrontational way. Of course, it's a relationship. Everybody will have their ethics. आपके parents के साथ आपकी एक unsaid contract होता है. But more importantly, give them space. And I think thank you, Maha, for reiterating for all of us that bas karo can be a good mantra and a place to begin with. So thank you very much for making time. And I absolutely enjoyed this conversation. More power to you, and kudos for believing in yourself. I think I've had those conversations with Maha because she's a dear friend. और ये जो शुरू में बात करी थी ना कि कई लोग कहते थे यार run, शायद ये इतना अच्छा idea नहीं है, you'll get tired. कहीं ना कहीं, I didn't say run, but I could have been one of those voices of caution. Are you sure you want to do this? But I'm so glad you did. And thank you very much for making time for us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Isi ke saath ji, this is it from this conversation. Do send me your comments and feedback. I think we had some wonderful advice for women in tech, women in general, and anyone who's trying to take space and be their own best version. So more power to all of you. Send us your comments and feedback. Inshallah, अगली दफ़ा फिर मुलाकात होगी. ख्याल रखें. खुदा हाफिज़.